The ACN podcast is made possible thanks to the generosity of our listeners and sponsors, including the Agile Alliance. As a nonprofit membership organization, the Agile Alliance is an excellent resource to help you along your Agile journey. To learn more about the Agile Alliance and our other sponsors, as well as how you can become a sponsor or supporter of our show, please visit acnpodcast.org for more information. And thank you for your support. Good morning and good evening, everyone. This is the Agile Coaching Network. My name is Ray Arell. The Agile Coaching Network, if you're not familiar, if this is your first time on the call, it's brought to you by Agile Alliance. The Agile Alliance is a nonprofit. I should probably rephrase this. It's actually not brought to you by the Agile Alliance. It's actually brought to you by the Agile Alliance members, because it is a membership organization. It's a trade organization that's been in existence since the dawn of the Agile Manifesto and its signing. Become a proud member. I've been a member for a number of years. Go up to agilealliance.org. You can see all the great things that the community has been delivering together, and I strongly advise that you become a part of us. If this is your first time here, we have a set of simple rules that are here put in place to keep us all safe and make sure that this doesn't come across as something that it isn't. This is a conversation between the community. And it's, yes, we do have some regulars here, which help to get the conversation started. And we love and enjoy to talk to one another, but we also want to talk with you. And that's regardless of whether or not you are new to Agile or you've been doing Agile development and practices for the last 10 to 15 years, as some of us have. Your input into this and joining the conversation gets your voice added to the bigger community and helps us to gain perspective and diversity. And those are things that we cherish as a community. Let's go ahead and get started. There were a couple of things that came up in the news over the last couple of weeks. And I thought it kind of interesting because when we were looking at the different questions, there was a common theme of things that were still sort of the artifact of COVID related of we're all working remotely, we're all working in our remote spaces. But there have been a slew of internal announcements as well as some more outward communication going out about companies that are starting to not just look at, but implement permanent work from home policies. And these companies are very major companies. These are not just the little shops. These are the big 100,000 to 200,000 workforce companies that are now looking at, well, let's move away from the model of bringing people all to the office, which I think that was the last decade, which we saw work from home policies pretty much evaporate and people were being moved back into office spaces, to the total opposite, which is now that we know that there are some benefits from working from home, but also equally such, as we've had to do social distancing and other things, maybe we should just move this way moving forward from just a safety perspective. So with that, there were a line of questions that were around this. Is number one of how does this affect your Agile teams? One of the things that we promoted in our Agile practices has been, let's get the group together, let's get the team together for daily stand-ups, let's do a bunch of in-person rituals where we are all standing together and talking and interacting or mobbing or paired programming and other things. How is this affecting those types of practices that you have? How is it also, are you adapting your coaching and your methods of how you coach teams as well? Are you using what type of mechanisms itself? Because I think people on this call could really benefit about the way that you're approaching your work. And then lastly, what about productivity and effectiveness? I went through a period of time where there was the question of, if someone's out of sight, out of mind, it was sort of like your child, right? It's like suddenly the cookie jar is getting raided and, nobody's working because we can't see it. We can't actually walk by, do, the patterns of management by walking around or, coaching by walking around and all of those other things. We can't do that. So the question of productivity and effectiveness always creeps into this conversation. Are our teams being effective, or in the kind of the reversal of that, are people working too much? Are they burning themselves out? And so I know this is a big, meaty topic, but there were a lot of questions on the threads that we've been collecting around this area. So to kick us off on this, Jorg, would you like to take an attempt on this?
Yeah, as you said, that one's significantly big and lots of aspects. I want to start with one that's always pretty close to my heart, and that is learning. I think we are at the start, or at least on the first few steps of learning how to do this really effectively. That work remote and not being able to come together. And if that stays, we will have to do a lot more learning, like maybe instead of walking around, phoning around, we probably will see tools that get us better connected and make us recognize in what state somebody is working concentrated or interested in having a coffee and all this kind of stuff. I'm really optimistic that a lot of solutions will pop up around this, and exchange and learning from each other will make a big difference. And that's the important thing. Don't let people think it's done and it's a fixed way. Same as in the office where you can do that, interject new ideas, get new ideas moving, and then people will surprise you with the way of working that they will have in a year. That's my main take, and that's why I'm extremely interested in the follow-up discussion now.
Yeah, what Jörg said, I totally agree. I mean, we have, when we just look at the last half year, when I see what we have learned, it's just amazing. Things we thought are not possible to work out in a distributed fashion they are becoming possible. All the learning and so on is enormous. I would like to shed, nevertheless, also light on another aspect. How does this affect agile teams and the effectiveness? And I mean, I work for a very large international distributed company. I was running a work stream looking into productivity across this company. And it's amazing how diversified the planet is, how different cultures in different countries are taking this. So there are cultures where just from a societal point of view, the people feel the pressure to prove to the boss that they are productive. So they are all the time updating their boss, like, now I'm walking the dog during the day, is that okay? Or I have a doctor's appointment, can I do this? And these kind of things. And so there is a certain nervosity still, and the effect is that there is uncertainty in the agile teams. And what we have seen is that in the beginning, at least, we saw productivity rising like hell because people were over-proving that they are worth of working from home. And now the effect is leveling a little bit out. That's an observation because people now have the experience on how draining it is to sit in front of a screen the whole day, having back-to-back meetings. Now people are fighting, of course, with this whole how do I plan in breaks and how do I defend my breaks? We start learning principles like no meeting is an hour. Every meeting is like 50 minutes or maximum 55 minutes. So we have 5 to 10 minutes leg stretch in between. All these things we are learning. Where I see this is going is, at least for our company, not necessarily a permanent work from home policy, but rather an offer to the employees, do what you feel is the best for you and your work-life balance. So we have people in our company who enjoy working from home and who say, this is so much better. And then we have people who say, no, I'm really missing the office. I want to go there and so on. So we will still have for sure an offering for those people who want to go to the office. But also their offices will evolve more and more into a meeting space or an experience space where you can do brainstorming and all these stuff, these things that are really hard to do when you're working in a distributed way.
Okay, thank you for that. Deanna, your microphone went on.
What's been interesting about this, I mean, I experienced myself the overworking for the first 6 or 8 or even 10 or 12 weeks of this, just feeling like I had to be on all the time. And so I've been very empathetic about that when I talk to my clients and colleagues. And, it's somebody, somewhere on Twitter said, no, I'm not working from home. I'm living at work. right? I mean, we're always here, and it's always depending on what platform you use, whether it's Zoom or Teams or, whatever, or GoTo like this one. It you're always there. I mean, the variation that we had when we were at work, where we would be working at our desk and then we would walk over to a conference room and then we would go down to the cafeteria and then we would have different conversations in different environments. And that's no longer true. All the conversations are happening in the same place. And and what Henrik was saying about the learning, and Jorg was saying about the learning that we're doing, I think is critical. And I went back to a number of the books and the people who have been investigating this for a long time, even in the Agile space. Several years ago, Jutta Eckstein wrote a book called Agile Software Development with Distributed Teams, and that's a great book with referencing all the research. And Johanna Rothman and Mark Kilby have written From Chaos to Success with Distributed Agile Teams. So we have some resources out there, people who've been looking at these problems for a long time before this year, and coming up with techniques and strategies for doing those things. And then across the board, one of my personal favorites we talked about earlier is Scott Birkin's My Year Without Pants, that really talked about at a small company level, how do you manage this whole having people not together in an office, and how to make it possible. And so I think we have a lot of opportunity to learn from those folks who've been doing it for a while. It's sort of like the Agile Manifesto. We've been doing this thing and we've learned some stuff, and we have some things to share. And that's my primary message to the people I come into contact with is this is an extraordinary learning opportunity. And are we going to stay this way forever? Does it really matter? I mean, we're this way now, and we're this way for the foreseeable future. So we may as well figure out how to get good at it. And then we have the adaptability to work however we want, no matter what happens. Whether we get to spend more, for me, it would be getting to spend time together in an office from time to time, or whether we're always in this distributed setting. We just need to create the adaptability so that we have the resilience to be able to respond no matter what happens. The productivity and burnout piece is really important. The biggest challenge I've been noticing is for Agile teams is their organizations not providing them with the tools and platforms that they need. Teams that can all log into the same coding screen, but have no video to be able to see each other ever. They're all on the phone. That is not a productive way of working. But their company is reluctant to sort of give them the full tooling set that they need to be as productive as they can possibly be. And I'm finding that is a challenge in a lot of places. And so I'm hoping that those organizations will learn that, this way of working can work well, but we need to give it the attention that it needs and make sure that we're enabling the teams with the appropriate tools and collaboration techniques. So, folks, in my world, I hear a lot about how folks are doing their retrospectives now, and there's a whole lot of folks working on that problem and a lot of information coming out about how to manage that problem and have really effective, 5-step retrospectives where people can come out with some really good improvement. And definitely opportunities for continuous improvement abound right now. So nobody has an excuse to let their retrospectives go just because they're working in a distributed way.
Right. And I think to add to this, I mean, I've never had the luxury of having all of my teams in one place. And, I used to work for a big Fortune 100 company. There was a lot of people I never met. I mean, physically, but they live their lives within their sites, and they're working with their local team members, and they also worked and collaborated well with others. I had the chance of meeting the author of A Year Without Pants, and going through and having that conversation about the shift of a Microsoft person, because that's who he was, a Microsoft manager moving into a total virtual company, and that mental adjustment. And I think a lot of people are still going through the mental adjustment. And I think this adapting our coaching and our coaching methodologies towards this, I think we have to, one, give ourselves license that we are adjusting. We are in transition. And then to your final point of just about tools, I don't know about the rest of you all, and I'll get to as I start to enable other microphones here. The tools are flat to me. I guess I'm finding that the cloud, I was so excited when it came out, and by the way, the cloud is just somebody else's computer. The applications just feel like we're missing the collaboration part. And so the process of experience of what work at home is, I think there's aspects of we need to share more experiences of how we make that good. And how do we make it good for ourselves personally, and share those stories out broader? Gerald, are you there?
Hey, so thanks for hosting this. I think it's my second or third one. Really interesting topics. I think, while you guys were talking, I was reflecting on a couple things. What Hendrik said about like his company moving permanently to this, it's one of the things that I see us reflecting on, whether this is a work flexibility or whether it's a way of working. Are we going to, allow people to come into the office as they want, work from home as they want, or are we going to try to invest in people's at-home work offices and really go more virtual for a large portion of the organization? I think either choice has a lot of implications for a lot of the rituals we do with our teams around Agile. If you're going to have a hybrid team, but versus like a fully virtual team. I think it does change the dynamics. Some people see each other every day, and then there's people that they don't see in person. But I am reminded of this thing, Lisa Atkins, always bring it to the team. One of the things that we've been finding with our teams is that they were only interacting over work-related topics. So it got very easy. You'd connect, you'd talk about retrospective or your planning or whatever problem you were solving that day, and you disconnect. And so we had to be a lot more deliberate in encouraging people to find the informal time that they used to have in the office. And it sounds weird to schedule informal time, but we asked all the teams to really look at, if they had to take a more deliberate lens on how to create the informal time for themselves, what would that look like? And they came up with a bunch of different ideas. Some of them have games that they play, virtual games. They get together on a regular cadence to do that. Others have a happy hour check-in at 5 o'clock where they talk about stuff, and they all have a glass of wine together at home. Some of the teams have scheduled things like power talks and mastermind sessions where it's just like they get together and they talk about stuff that matters to them, and that they could like give each other advice on. So we came up with a whole bunch of, I would say, better ideas than if we had tried to come up with them all ourselves. But with the simple ask of being more deliberate in how you create those informal connections and bonds with each other as a team has been pretty powerful for us, and I think for the teams themselves. So remains to be seen where all of this goes, but I think if we continue to bring the issues to the team and ask them, how would you solve for this, we'll uncover quite a bit.
I think Scott Hanselman a few tweets back, and he tweets a lot, so that's a lot of tweets back. He started posting pictures about office spaces that people had sent him pictures on. How do you have your home office laid out? I mean, for an effective way. And I found, at least myself, I've moved my office around several. So yeah,
you just reminded me though. I mean, I think that's the other interesting thing about this is you're in people's homes.
Yes.
And I think there's actually something more intimate about this experience that we're going through than when you see people in person in the office, because like you see the real situations that they're going through with their kids or their parents or anything else that's going on in their house. And part of that is the realization that as a team, if one of your team members is going through something, all of you really are.
Right.
And it's a lot more intimate than I think we are used to. And it's brought up a whole host of interesting questions and conversations amongst folks that, again, I don't know where it all heads, but the definitely, what does your home office look like? But what is it? I don't remember who just said it, maybe Rebecca, but what is it like to live at work for you?
Yeah.
I think that's kind of interesting.
Yeah, that is interesting. And I remember actually working and living at work for a long time when I was doing CPU debug. It seemed that way. But thank you for your comments. Sheila, are you there?
This is a really interesting topic. So, Ray, I'm with you. I've always worked with teams that were in different spaces. So that piece of it has not really been too much of adapting, because a lot of these teams have been working that way, even though in offices, they were in different offices. So there had to be that, that collaboration in multiple places. I do have one team that I work with that was used to all being in the same, and that is the one that's adjusting. For me, the biggest thing is the adapting the coaching methods, because I can't be in person to do any type of one-on-one coaching and training sessions, which is where I would bring everybody together. Like, some techniques from training and from the back of the room don't translate very well into an online environment, and you have to figure out how to put those in place. So my biggest thing is adapting the coaching, which has been the biggest challenge to me.
What are some of the ways that you've expanded your toolkit a bit in that space?
So I've had to come up with different ways of doing retrospectives and new tools that can be used to do that, and ways of handling that online versus in person. And I also find that one conference tool does not fit all. So where Microsoft Teams might be the preferred software to use most of the time for a particular company, certain aspects of it are not there, and you might need to use a different software. So being able to know that what each option lends itself to. So I've been adapting liberating structure type facilitation techniques into an online environment, and working with people on how to use some other tools that allow to do things like Mural, Miro, Fun Retro, all these different online tools that people hadn't used before. And then from a one-on-one coaching, it's a matter of trying to get people to turn their video on.
Which for some people, that's very difficult. I think some aspects of it is just the technology. I mean, I don't know how many of you have had your internet drop in the last 24 hours, but I think we're fighting through just getting the technology tuned in. And I think in certain cases, the accommodation of that the meeting might not take place when we think it's going to take place, because we've just got some technical difficulties. Those things I think are just kind of interesting. Thank you for your input. I really appreciate it. One thing I would encourage you on some of the methods that you're coming up with, to write blogs on those. I know that we have a Slack channel for the Agile Coaching Network, and posting those methods up there. I think we have a section up there for remote work habits and things. So any input that you put onto that would be great. Thank you.
Okay, I have some that I've put on Medium, so I'll look at that.
Love to see those copied over to there as well. Linda, are you there?
I think we just brought up a really interesting point about getting people to turn on their cameras. And I would say it's a reflection of how safe people are feeling. I'm working someplace where people feel very unsafe. And it's an issue that we know we're going to have to work through. But throughout the whole group, no one turns on their cameras, because I know they don't feel safe. And it will be a reflection of them feeling more safe and more comfortable in the situation, but also within the people they're working with before they're going to turn their cameras on. And I'm also finding throughout this that the working from home is shining a spotlight on some of the problems that people could just kind of brush over. You can't ignore them anymore.
I think sometimes some of us close our laptops down and work with a regular piece of paper because we don't want the email to come in, or we don't want those other distractions that are coming in and hammering us. And I find that, the Slack universe and all the other great things, those are great and all, but you know what? There's 15 new Slack messages that popped up across the 15 boards that I have, all competing for my attention. And I think, methods that we use personally become vital and important there. Have you seen the same thing, Linda?
Absolutely. You find people who are sitting in meetings, they're like, oh, well, I'm getting hammered on Slack by, 6 other people. Oh, by the way, my boss. I'm going to have to step out for a little bit to deal with that. That sometimes it's very difficult. And I find it too. It's really easy to get distracted with a whole bunch of other things that are going on in those demands, and that to be able to have the almost a privilege of deep thinking time is so important, and it's elusive.
Catherine, who's on the call listening in right now, she says that it's also exhausting, which is, so many faces and the cameras that are all looking straight at you it does get tiring. And, I had a colleague the other day that clearly looked into stress and afterwards determined that she was having a migraine. And it was like the torture of having to have the camera on and just not physically wanting to be there, But thank you, Linda, for your...
And then to bookend that, yes, it is exhausting. And on more than one occasion when I finished the workday, I've needed a nap.
Yes. Yes. And those of us who are, one, attention deficit as well as somewhat reclusive, the fact of all of that energy going out to others, the recharge points are very important. So I fully agree with that. Thank you for that. Smita, are you there?
I have to apologize from the get-go. I have children in the next room, so you may hear some background.
Okay.
I wanted to agree with the previous speaker. It could be really tiring, and it's called Zoom fatigue, even if you're not using Zoom. I did a little bit research on that, on how to overcome Zoom fatigue, and during these remote situations, how can we increase productivity and effectiveness? One of the things, interestingly, that I read, and I partially agree, is turn off your camera if you do not need to have the camera with your known circle of teammates. Conserve the camera time when you are meeting with a new group, when you really need to read the body language. Unless that's required, please consider turning off the camera after 5 minutes of the meeting, if that is helpful. And do walking if you can during the meeting. I'm not sure if this will, I'm very sure that will be very subjective if you walk during your meeting. So consider with a grain of salt. These were the things that I got to know to fight the Zoom fatigue. Going back to the questions, how did this affect, or how is this affecting my Agile teams? Interesting to hear. Not very much. That's because the teams have not changed. I have been working with them for years, and I have already built the relationship with them during the water cooler time or the restaurant time or other events at office. I cannot imagine going into a brand new team and building relationship without being able to watch them, observe them, what makes them tick and where are their minefields. So I think it is, again, subjective. If you're forming a new team, it could be very difficult. What about the productivity and effectiveness? Again, I think it's subjective. For operations type of work, maybe not much change. For exploratory work where you need to sync up and brainstorm, I see a real impact there. Because multiple times the conversations goes around and it does not get solved. And finally, how am I adapting my coaching methods? I am looking at the situation in a very positive note. That's the best I can do. And I have learned a lot on how better to engage and how to reduce info overwhelm. Sometimes I have seen that the wealth of information leads to a poverty of understanding. Sometimes customization is going a long way. I may take long time to edit it and give just enough the information, but it is saving us a lot of pain in the long run.
Those are all that's real good input. I want to come work for your team. That sounds nice.
Thank you.
No problem. Kate, are you there?
Yeah, just to a little bit echo the previous speaker, I think to determine when a meeting is really needed and when it could be communicated in a different way, because if you're able to walk around during a meeting, which is an idea I love, then did it really need to be a meeting? Because I feel like meetings should have interaction and outcomes and be for decision making, not for, say, status updates. So I'll just put that out there and see if anyone else has tried to establish, outside of the Agile frameworks, criteria for when you really need a meeting and when a different type of communication or interaction is more effective.
The concept between a working meeting, where I need these great brains to come together in order to move the project forward. I think somehow meetings sometimes got vilified a bit about that's bad. In reality, I think that's good. The other thing is just status meetings in particular, meetings and status reports and other things. I learned a long time ago that my staff really didn't care about what a couple people are talking about sometimes because it had nothing to do with their work. But there were things that we needed to talk about as a staff in order for us to grow the organization. And so we switched to just lean coffee to go run the staff meeting. And we found that we would be done in less than 20 minutes, which would normally take an hour to get through the subjects. And if you guys go to leancoffee.org, I think that's the URL for that, for the methodology. And it's just simply, let's talk about something for about 5 minutes. Let's take a vote of whether or not it's relevant to everyone that's here in this room. And that vote basically determines whether or not we take it to the side. Maybe only 2 people care about it, and so they should go have a conversation. Or the group itself wants to continue forward on it because it does directly impact. I recommend those types of methods.
I've maybe something I can add here, and that is, sure. I've listened to a podcast recently that was really interesting. It was a podcast with Matt Mullenweg, the CEO of WordPress, which is a company that was born distributed, basically. And he has this model, this 5-level models of maturity in working distributed. And it's really interesting. So on a lower level of maturity, you are just doing what you would do in the office. Now you do it just online. Yeah. So you have the same number of meetings, and just that they are online, and you're trying to fight with the tools and the audio quality and everything. But on the next level, actually, you go what he calls asynchronous, which means, where do we really need to spend time together at the same point in time looking at the same stuff? That's his guiding question. And I think this is a very helpful question that we can look into. Just an example, we have some meetings where we are sharing technology presentations or something like this, and then have a discussion. And what we have started to experiment with is now that actually the person that's doing the talk, that person's just pre-recording this thing. The participants of the meeting, they can actually consume that recording whenever it suits them. And then we have a much, much shorter, quicker meeting for question, answers, and discussions. So this is just one thing that got me inspired on really thinking through, where do we need to have synchronous time?
That's really good. And where did you read this at?
A podcast. The podcast series is called Making Sense Podcasts.
Okay.
They're on different channels, I think. And the guy who was on the podcast, who was interviewed, was Matt Mullenweg, the CEO of WordPress.
Great.
He's written a blog also about this.
Okay.
So it's a very nice webpage with his material and insights.
That's awesome. I can
share this with you, and you can publish it.
That'd be great. Thanks. Prasad.
Yeah, I just wanted to share one, I would say, experience since last 6-7 months, since the lockdown begins here, and the way we are conducting different sessions. Of course, it's online sessions that we are conducting it, and how I would be proceeding further with those sessions, because I'm a trainer. I would be there throughout the day on some other the teams, guiding them or probably explaining them by using a different ways, like slideshows or presentations that we do have, or audio calls that we do have. Regularly I'm meeting a different kinds of people, because every day, probably every other day, there would be a different teams that I would be dealing with, and it would be difficult for them to cope up with, because all of a sudden a new team would be in front of me and I have to adjust with them. What I have started doing since last couple of months is, whenever I'm getting a new team, probably at the initial level, but for the first time introduction, I'm taking the cameras on for everyone so that we can have a face-to-face. Probably by their name, I can understand who is that particular person that I'm dealing with, probably for another couple of days that I'm regularly dealing with. And later on, whenever we are deciding on the break time, like let's consider that morning 7 o'clock we'll start our session, and probably around 11:30 that we may have a break, and we would decide that this break is not going to be a break, but this break going to be a probably a video call. We are stopping our task, whatever we are doing it at a particular time, and we would be using a video again on, and probably sharing our like a regular chit chat, like probably like we are friends, and probably sharing my experience about something, probably a new movie or some new some talk shows or something like that we are sharing it, probably for sometime like 15 minutes or 20 minutes, and probably we would feel a bit relaxed. We are not tense to discuss further about our regular discussion what is on, and again we are switching off the cameras and we are going further. Probably this would give us probably the more energy to work ahead, because the entire day, that approximately 10 hours that we are working, and probably we are conversing with each other, we are displaying something to each other, explaining something to each other, and probably it's a tiring experience all throughout the day. You're probably wearing your headphones and talking to someone. That's the reason I've started doing this since last couple of months, that we are taking a it's an obvious break that we are having it, but we are not individually taking the breaks, but we are taking a common breaks, probably grabbing a coffee mug and probably standing in front of us, in front of each other, probably on a video cameras, and we would be discussing with each other there. That's
Wonderful.
just wanted to share one experience that I've started doing this. Probably a bit relaxation that we all are feeling it, not the regular official talks that we have, but probably the light conversation would be cheering up each other.
Oh, very good, very good. Thank you for that. Javier, are you there?
I just want to share a little bit of how I think about whether something should be a meeting or not. And one is, do we need to build shared understanding or possibly as well agreement? So do we have unstructured information or things that require fast feedback, so that we can make sure that a certain group of people all have the same mental model or something, and possibly also make decisions that are validated by the whole group? But then the second component is, in that group of people, is the communication network balanced and effective? So is everybody able and expected to contribute something, right? If it's a group where basically 2 or 3 people talk and everybody else is just nodding, probably it's not that important that everybody's there. But if it's a group that has communication patterns and trust, such that everybody who's there has something to contribute and is open to sharing it, then that is then they should be there, and that group is an effective working session. If some of those people perhaps aren't able to communicate and you cannot fix it, sometimes it's better to actually have multiple groups or different ways of communicating information. But basically, and this is actually something I got from the idea from the systemic modeling, from clean language and systemic modeling, in which you actually map the communication patterns of a network or a group, and you see the effectiveness of that team in how even is that communication with the people. It doesn't have to be always everybody speaking, but on average, everybody should be contributing. If you have those two, then you have a working session, you have an effective meeting. If you don't, you should look at other options, in my opinion.
Agreed. One of the patterns that I use specifically in in-person coaching as well as remote, is I will doodle on a pad, and I'll put a dot for each of the people in the meeting. And I'll start drawing lines of communication between those dots to see where the communication is going. And it's just a real simple doodle to do while you're watching team interactions, and you start to see outlier patterns based upon that. It's classic example that I typically use it for is that everyone communicates to, say, the Agile coach, but they don't communicate with each other. So a daily stand-up is pointed towards an individual rather than it sharing information across the rest of the group. So yes, similar situation that I've used as well. With that, let's go ahead and get to the last question for today, because we've got about 10 minutes left. This has been a great conversation, by the way. I really enjoyed some of the ideas. Hopefully people come up, and I'll post how to get to the Slack channel at the end of the call. But post those ideas up onto the Slack channel, because that will encourage others to be able to learn from what you've come up with already. So the last one is sort of a little bit more open, and just throwing out ideas of what you guys are reading nowadays, and specifically what resources, books, blogs, articles, white papers, etc. Maybe some dark alley someplace where you go learn about business and leadership agility. What books are you reading? What are they? Jorg, what do you have?
The last book I spent some time with was David Marquet's Language of Leadership, which I found quite inspiring in terms of blogs. Yeah, several. I don't really have one in particular. Obviously, the Agile Alliance is something I'm looking at really consistently. But right at the moment, I don't have anything spectacular.
See, Hendrik, what about you?
Depends on who you talk to. I mean, if you talk to, I just got a new manager in the organization that I work in, and he was asking me, how can I get started with business agility and so on? And I recommended Unlocking Agility by Jürgen Hesselberg to him, because that is really like a good primer, giving you a great overview over things. Otherwise, it's not so much books, it's bits and pieces, and things are like my fit for purpose model that I'm promoting, and where I have wonderful discussions with people around our organization. And another tool actually that we are discovering is Wortley Maps to discuss business agility. But these are more tools, and this is more maybe for people who are already experienced in Agile and who want to enhance their skills.
Jürgen's book is really good. I had a chance to read through that. Deanna, do you have some ideas?
I've just been introduced this summer to a new book called The Braided Organization, which comes from folks who have been working in sort of socio-technical systems and organizations theory for a long time. Bill Passmore and I forget the other author's name, William Passmore, and it is a real updated ideas about business agility and how we structure our organizations to, enable and encourage resilience and agility and so on. And then, of course, there is the Business Agility Institute, which you can find online, and there are lots of good white papers and videos and things from their conferences that are available for these things. And I think there is a link with Agile Alliance there. I think Agile Alliance has been a sponsor of some of those events, and
it's very true. Yeah. Catherine just posted on, it's not an Agile book, but she is reading A Woman with No Importance, telling a story about amazing leaders, which is cool. Sheila, are you there? What are you reading?
Neither one of these are Agile books, but books that I have found to be very helpful. And one, I feel like I'm like promoting this book nonstop. Never Split the Difference by Chris Voss. And it's about negotiating. He's a former FBI hostage negotiator, and the book is great for kind of giving you a foundation for how to listen and understand what somebody's asking for, what somebody wants in that give-take relationship. So I found that book to be fascinating and very good if you're doing Agile coaching. It's very, very informative on ways to listen and negotiate. And the other book is Lincoln on Leadership. And that's just a book that has some of the things that Abraham Lincoln did for leadership, which I found, again, from a leadership standpoint, how he was very open, how he was, the honesty, the transparency, and kind of a little bit ahead of his time and being adhering to some of these great visibility, transparency, open door policy type leadership style.
Wonderful. Thank you for those ideas. Stefano, are you there?
Well, one of the books that I had the opportunity to read in the last few months is Agile Leadership Toolkit by Peter Koenig. It's one of the professional Scrum series by Scrum.org. One of them is the organization I'm working for. And basically, I found it very, very effective because it's not just philosophy, but it gives you tools that you can use out of the box the next day you have read it. And basically, it divides the role of the Agile leader as a co-creator, facilitator, experimenter, and cultural leader. And along with that, it gives you for each and every role different tools that you can use in order to better do your work as an Agile leader. I found it very, very effective and very useful. It's not just philosophy, but it's an actually useful book.
I appreciate that input. Terrence, how about you?
Well, mine is kind of a common book, and probably many people have read it already. But The Art of Doing Twice the Work in Half the Time by Sutherland, I tend to go back to it periodically just to get the enthusiasm, just to go remind me of where the roots are, so that, I'm hit all of the time with, here's a different idea, here's something I need to go do, here I'm overwhelmed that day. But I read a page or a paragraph and I feel very calm and I'm back in Scrum and I feel good about it.
Good. Thank you for that. A couple of things I saw people posting online here. Turning Around the Ship, of course, David Marquette on that one. And if you guys get a chance also, when David actually goes through and he reviews the accuracy of sub-movies and Navy movies is just hilarious, because he actually goes through and says, well, was Hunt for Red October, was that accurate or not? Which is really funny. Star, how about you? What do you have?
So I would echo anything by David Marquet, including his weekly leadership nudge. It's great, it's super short, and it's a quick reminder every week, and it's a way to kind of get those refreshers. The other book that I've read is Leadership Agility. It talks about the 5 levels of mastery. I found that really helpful, especially if you can identify where you are and where you want to get, and how to, then there's a framework in there that you can kind of rate yourself against and get other people to give you feedback. And then I am rereading The 4 Agreements. And it is definitely not, quote, an Agile book, but it is, I think it has a lot of the concepts and behaviors and agreements that we would expect a servant leader to have.
Wonderful. Well, thank you very much for those. I know there's a few more hands that are up. I apologize. We are reaching the top hour. And as always, it just feels like we didn't have enough time together. But I do appreciate everyone who joins on an ongoing basis. I'd like to thank the regulars that come in, support the show. I couldn't do this show without you. We have, and if you go up to the agilecoachingnetwork.org or follow it to Apple Podcasts, Spotify, all of the major redistribution sites for the website, you can find all of the previous episodes and everything that we've talked about before, which is all available to you because we love you. And I want to thank everyone again, and I hope you guys have a great month. This podcast is provided by Agile Alliance for educational and informative purposes only. To find out more information about the member-supported Agile Alliance, please go to agilealliance.org. To to find out about more upcoming events as well as different programs that are available to help you with your Agile journey.